I work for 18 national farmers unions in the different parts of Southern Africa. So what I'm going to be speaking about is relating to the producers sort of side. And I'll start by a few contextual observations or matters that is important to the discussion. The first is really that, as we all know, farmers are both consumers and producers. So on both sides, the waste and the loss matters to them as consumers and producers. And also, one sad fact is that farmers are not only the hungriest segment of society, they are also amongst the most malnourished, and yet they are the producers of food, which is quite a sad reality that we really need to address. The third part is also that farmers react to both supply push and demand pull, and they are caught in the middle. So when addressing the matter, we really need to look at both the supply side and the demand side. The fourth part is that the value proposition for change for farmers is not only financially based or economic based. There are other value propositions that needs to be taken into account when advocating for change. Fifth part is that not all farmers are the same. You really need to have a very differentiated approach when dealing with farmers, not make them homogeneous. The last point is that farmers normally act as individual units, not in an aggregated format. So the value proposition needs to speak to the individual farmer, not to a group of aggregators, be they up the chain or down the chain. Some issues to consider is that, in my view, from where we stand, information and knowledge is concentrated right at the top. At the academic level, at the political level, at the policy level, that's where the knowledge and information about food waste and loss is concentrated. Not down the structures where, in my view, it matters significantly. There's also too much focus, in my view, on political commitments and leadership at the very top and less at the very bottom, where change matters and where change should be driven from. Related to research, one could argue that it's so much focus on more the technical issues, which is good, and less on the behavioral science, which is fundamental in driving change, in my view. Similarly, the business case for change is much more at the aggregated level, not at the individual level. And finally, farmers' organizations are very fundamental, not because I work for them, but because they are very good infrastructure for change. And yet, food loss and waste is not on their agenda at all. We don't discuss food waste as farmers' organizations, neither as a regional platform or as individual farmers' national associations. I propose the following as action points. First is really starting with the very basics. Increase understanding, awareness, and appreciation of the problem at the very low level, because there's a dearth of knowledge. We recently had a conference, and when the subject was discussed amongst all the 18 national farmers unions, it was amazingly surprised that there was ignorance about it. So let's educate those at the lower levels to understand the problem so that they can move from a state of unconscious ignorance to one that will propel them to act. The second point is that we need really to involve farmer structures, particularly in terms of communicating the information and the knowledge that is true operating at the very high level, bring it down to the farmer level, and then also ensure that that information is used for advocacy. It's better, in my view, for farmers to speak on their own behalf about matters that concern them in terms of food waste and loss than for scientists and researchers to go directly to the policymakers. They should via those that are most impacted by the phenomenon. The other point really is, as I said, we need differentiated solutions because we have subsistence farmers whose issues to do with FWL are completely different to some extent, to a large extent rather, to those that are producing for the market. We also need to enhance access to farmers to food waste and loss management tools, including insurance. So let's talk about insurance as a waste management issue. Let's talk about post-production technology. Let's talk about also appropriate financial facilities that speak to addressing the problem. The other point really is about investment in public type infrastructure, such as roads, energy, as well as communication, and all the basics that makes not only farming but decent living more pleasant. The other point really is that I said earlier on that farmers are both reacting to demand pressures as well as supply pressures. And so it is really a value chain approach. Everyone, the suppliers, the consumers are complicit in the crime of food waste and loss. So they should also be complicit in dealing with the problem. It cannot reside in farmers paying for the price only. Let it be shareable across the different levels of the chain. When one is looking at measurement of performance for research, for development support, for extension, I think part of the measurement should be the extent to which they are causing food loss or waste, so that they don't have to invest in those, or they do invest in those areas that will cause food waste and loss, but with that consciousness, as well as putting measures, what kind of other mitigating systems they may have to put in place as they promote increased production productivity. Then the last point really for me is let's target the new generation of farmers, who are also the new generation of consumers, and let's find ways of effectively communicating with them so that they grow up with the culture of conserving, with the culture of good food, good eating, and of course, with the culture of good environmental stewardship. Thank you.